Empire. It's an interesting season, one like no other, but the NFL continues to roll on. What's up, everybody? It's Mike Jones. Thanks for coming back for another episode of the Football Jones podcast. You can read me at usatoday.com, follow me on Twitter and Instagram at @ByMikeJones. And as I mentioned, this is just quite a season here. We saw the Tennessee Titans and Pittsburgh Steelers game get postponed because of the COVID outbreak down there at the Titans headquarters. We saw Sunday's game between the Patriots and the Chiefs get bumped back a day because Cam Newton and a backup quarterback on the Chiefs team got COVID. Their teams were able to continue to proceed without a spread. They've been very vigilant about trying to contain and prevent the spread of COVID. And as a result, they were able to get their game in. But this is just a year, something we've never seen before. And who knows what's going to happen the rest of the way, the other 12 weeks of the regular season. Our guest today is Bob Glauber of New York's Newsday. He's covered the league for a long time, seen a lot of crazy stuff, and I wanted to have him on for his insight. We're going to talk about this COVID impacted NFL season. Also, talk about the New York Giants and the New York Jets, who are just in such bad shape right now, like they have never been. Well, there was one time, as Bob's going to tell us. And then we're going to talk a little bit about this downtrodden NFC East, which once was one of the most feared and well-respected divisions in the NFL, and now it is just kind of a laughingstock. No team with a winning record, and no relief in sight for a number of these teams. But we're going to get to it all now with Bob Glauber of New York's Newsday. All right, and here we are with Bob Glauber of New York's Newsday, NFL columnist, also president of the Pro Football Writers of America. Bob, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Mike. I'm glad you finally whittled down the list and got to my name. It's very kind of you.
Well, I know you're extremely busy, and you know, I am honored that someone as royalty as you would dignify me with a few moments of your time. I don't like rejection. It's scary. So I know if I'm going to ask the president of the PFWA and an esteemed columnist from New York City, huge media market, that I'm going to ask you to give me time, you know, I really have to get my guts up. And it's like, maybe it's not hot enough topic time. You know, maybe I should wait. I'll go for lower hanging fruit, you know? And so I finally was like, you know what? He's going to blow me off, but I just got to ask. And amazingly, you fit me in. So I am very, very grateful that you would do this for me.
I am honored to be your guest, Michael. Always good to talk to you. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. It's a crazy year. And you've covered the NFL for how many years now?
75.
75.
Oh, I don't know. It's like 36. This is my 36th NFL season.
So, I mean, I wasn't even born yet when you started covering the NFL.
Is that right? Is that true?
No, I'm 39.
Oh, but that's pretty close. So you were just getting out of diapers when I started covering football, Mike. And this is awesome.
Yeah. So you have
glad I stuck around.
You have seen a lot. You have covered some strange seasons, but nothing like this. Where does this compare to wacky seasons that you have covered?
Nowhere. It's in a class by itself, Mike. I mean, it's just like an instantaneous answer on that because, you know, we've never seen anything like this. And I mean, you have strike years and you have lockout. I think it's labor stuff that impacts NFL seasons before, but you know, this is historic stuff, once in a century kind of an illness, and the requirements for trying to get a season in have been astronomically high. And I commend all the leagues for really getting their sports going again. And football is a little bit of a different situation only because, you know, they've had to go start to finish. These other sports, Basketball basically went right into playoffs. Hockey, almost the same thing. Baseball, a very abbreviated season. NFL's trying to do it start to finish. So the degree of difficulty here is really high. So no, nothing comes close to this ever. And I don't think anything comes close to this in the history of the entire league.
Yeah, and also for people who don't know a little behind the scenes stuff, as the president of the PFWA, you are working with the league, trying to arrange access for us reporters.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is all set up. And so it's been different. We don't have locker room access. They are, a select number of people allowed to attend games and things like that. And then there's Zooms, but you had to do a lot of work behind the scenes just to try to set up working conditions for the media. What was that? Because you've never had to haggle on anything like that before either.
Yeah, Mike, normally our biggest problem in January, and you were there, is like the buses at the Super Bowl were not running really a lot. So the writers were like, Bob, where are the buses? I'm like, come on, guys, take an Uber. So, but this now rose to an unprecedented level. And I got to tell you, Mike, there were a lot of ups and downs, and it started out pretty down because I worked, I would say, close to every day. I'd speak to this guy at the NFL named Michael Signora, who is the vice president of communications, and he is, the liaison for the league with the writers. Now, he's been fantastic. He's a very communicative guy, and he's always, he really is on the writer's side in terms of trying to get access. But I'm telling you, Mike, there were a couple of moments when it looked like we might get 0 to 2 writers at training camp practices, pool reporters, 0 to 2. So it literally started at 0. And there was one day I'm talking to Mike, I don't know, it's probably May, maybe early June. And I'm walking around a field. I'm about to visit my mother in a nursing home. And, we can't get in there because of COVID. We have to have these drive-by visits. So, life is upended anyway. And I'm walking around a field and I'm thinking, Mike, we're dead. We're dead. What do you mean? Well, this is not going to work, is it? We're going to get nothing. We're going to get shut out here. And I don't know what to say. He goes, well, and he kind of felt the same thing. But, we kept hammering away, and the union was very receptive to our needs. And you were on a Zoom call with George Atala and a couple of union folks who, listened to our needs. And people don't care about this because, it's like they just watch the game and that's all they want to know about. And that's fine. That's true. But covering it really became an ordeal. And in the end, Mike, anybody who wanted to cover a training camp practice who was a credentialed member of the media was able to do so in almost every practice they wanted to go to. And anyone in the media who is credentialed is able to go to a game if they so choose. So we went from 0 to, as much of a sense of normalcy in this era as you can possibly imagine.
Right. Now, what was it like for you? What has it been like as just the uncertainty of, okay, when teams have these positive tests, there was no interruption for training camp. There wasn't any interruption until a couple weeks ago with Tennessee. What was your reaction to that? Again, having, covered strike years, having, covered during 9/11, just the way that this interrupted everything. And then again, this past weekend with New England threatened it for a little bit, but they were okay, the next day.
Yeah, that's a good question. And, you bring up 9/11 and that, I guess that season is probably the closest because of, a huge worldwide event. The closest to the kind of weirdness that we're seeing now, obviously different circumstance, but it was, a little bit of a shocker, but only in the respect that things had gone so well in training camp and so well for the first 3 weeks. It was like, oh my God, are they going to pull this off? And, you had to expect something like that. I think there was one moment in training camp, and you recall this, when there were a bunch of false positives that were experienced around the league in several teams. And one of those teams was the Jets, and they had to cancel practice. So it impacted a local team here. So it kind of said, and I remember writing, just like, oh, this is what the NFL had feared. Mm-hmm. Now, fortunately, it was a false alarm, but now it's becoming real. So, I think that it's a wait and see approach. The fact that it's only one team is still remarkable. Really, it's 2 because of what happened to Cam Newton, but they did end up playing that game. So I think it continues to be a wait and see approach. Do they get a full season in? I don't know. But I think the NFL is smart enough and creative enough and ambitious enough that they'll finish some kind of season and they'll have playoffs, and I think will have a Super Bowl. We just don't know when that will be necessarily. They're hoping that they get everything in, but I think that you have to really go by the timeline of the virus, and that's just unpredictable.
Yeah, one question I get a lot of is, and everybody looks at the NBA and the way they're doing it in the NHL. NBA had 1 bubble, NHL had 2 bubbles, I believe it was. And people ask me, why doesn't the NFL do a bubble? That's a much more major, large-scale undertaking for the NFL with 50 something guys on a roster and half a dozen, maybe a dozen coaches and everything to be in a bubble for all these teams. But what about regional bubbles? That's another question I get. And playoff bubbles, what do you know about the chances of that happening if there was another type of outbreak like this?
Yeah, my sense, Mike, is that they want to do it like this, where the teams stay in their respective training sites for the remainder of the season. We're talking about Super Bowl planning right now. I'm talking, again, with this guy, Mike Signora from the league, and we're talking about whether teams might go to Tampa right after the championship game and kind of stay in place, form a little bubble there, or whether they go back and to their respective sites. So I don't see these regional bubbles going on. I don't see a national bubble going on. I think the NFL realizes that you're talking about thousands of people being housed in one area. I mean, baseball kind of did these regional things, but hockey and basketball, far fewer players, far fewer coaches and team employees, so they were able to do it, and for half the time.
Right.
So again, they were not in that full season mode where the NFL is having to do that. So I don't sense, Mike, that there will be bubbles per se, like we've seen in hockey and basketball and now baseball with the playoffs. I think they're going to try to get through it the best they can, deal with outbreaks like the Tennessee one as they come up, and try to power through.
Now, what have you noticed as far as the competitive balance of not having fans in the stands? Has that impacted teams at all?
I think so, to some degree. I think there's less of a home field advantage. A lot of players have talked about that. You're playing in these quiet buildings and stadiums, and it's weird. You get noise piped in, but it's not the same. You can't say that players are not impacted when the roar of the crowd on a huge turnover late in the game is going to affect you. It just does. So you don't have that. But I think over time, Mike, we've seen less of an emphasis on home field advantage. I think free agency has kind of evened the playing field in terms of teams getting good over time. So I think there's been less of an emphasis on home field even without this situation, but it's probably a little bit more emphasized now.
And now up in New York, you cover 2 teams there with the Jets and the Giants. It's been a rough year, not just because of COVID, but both of those teams. What has it been like? Have you ever had a year where both teams in the city are as just feeble as they are right now?
Well, Mike, you know that I've been around a long time, but I haven't been around as long as the last time it was this bad in terms of covering this stuff. It was alive, but the last time the 2 teams were 0-4 at the same time was 1976. My colleague Neil Best did a retrospective piece on that, and somewhat similar circumstances in that it's an election year. Fans are thinking about presidential politics, and their football teams stink, and so that's the Giants and Jets right now. It's just collectively bad. I would say the Jets are the worst team because they're dealing with a coach who is probably not going to be back next year. The Giants, in their first year under Joe Judge, with a younger quarterback in Daniel Jones, I think that there'll be more stability longer term there. But it's there's just not much to really be interested in with New York football, unless you're just a diehard who likes to see either bad football or see a team try to develop over time, which is where the Giants are in year one of the Joe Judge era. Jets, just another catastrophe. What are you going to do?
How does this happen for the Jets? I mean, I felt like Adam Gase basically didn't prove that he was worthy of a head coaching job while he was with the Dolphins. Some people I had talked to had said that there were players who had played for him and said that he was the worst coach they'd ever played for. But he was appealing to the Jets, and, he's still here and we're seeing this. But what exactly was the appeal, and how did he even make it to this season?
Well, deep questions, and let's just go back to the start. So Christopher Johnson takes over for Woody Johnson a couple of years ago when Woody becomes ambassador to the UK under the Trump administration. So Christopher is new at this, and it's his first coaching change. So he thought about changing the coach and general manager, says, it's too much of a heavy lift. Let's just do the coach. So Mike McCagnon looks at, Mike McCarthy. They look at, a bunch of the younger coaches. They tried to expand their horizons. They thought about Eric Bieniemy. Should have thought harder about him. There's no question about that. And they just came to the conclusion that Adam Gase, despite having flamed out in Miami, and you've seen coaches fail in one city and do well in another. They felt that he was a forward-thinking guy, that he would be good for Sam Darnold, and they went in that direction. And it's just been a nightmare ever since. Sam, look, you get an offensive coordinator or a quarterback's coach to take care of your quarterback. You don't really have to take the next step and make that guy your head coach. Some guys are built to be coordinators or position coaches, and Adam Gase is one of those guys. I don't even know. His offenses are so unimaginative and unproductive that, I don't even know if he'd be a good offensive coordinator right now.
Right, because it was Peyton Manning was basically the only reason why he was good.
It was just gonna get to Peyton Manning. So Peyton Manning makes a phone call to Christopher Johnson as they are in the final stages of the coaching search. And I think that phone call had a big impact. Now, Peyton and Adam Gase had worked together in Denver. Peyton liked Gase. Gase was a grinder. He was a film guy. He was, nonstop football. So that appealed to him. But, to take that and take it to the next level and project that as a great head coach, especially after a failed run in Miami, I think that Christopher Johnson fell for it. Mike McCagnon fell for it. And then a year later, and after a free agency, after the draft, Christopher Johnson goes and fires Mike McCagnon and brings in Joe Douglas. Now, I think Douglas is solid, and he's made some solid moves so far. But now you get this, you just can't keep Adam Gase, and unless things turn around, which I don't expect, you can't keep him, indefinitely. So I think it's going to be, again, this musical chairs situation, and hopefully they land a coach that can be decent long term.
Yeah, it's remarkable. It's that Peyton Manning making the phone call is crazy because, look, I covered Vernon Davis when he was in Washington, and he was good there. But when he was in Denver, he looked like he couldn't play anymore. And I asked him what happened, and he said, well, look, when you get to Denver, they hand you the playbook, but then there's also a Peyton Manning playbook. And that's what you ran in games. It was hard to learn two playbooks at one time. And, so it's still just, I guess Manning liked him because he let him run his own stuff.
Yeah, and I think that they were kindred spirits in terms of what they looked at in football. And again, they would have competitions about who could get there earlier and who could stay later. Oh, great. Okay, that's good. And that sounded good, when Gase got hired. I kind of written about that. That's great. Okay, and getting a vote of confidence and getting a blessing from Peyton Manning, it's not an unreasonable thing to think is a positive. You can't say, well, Peyton Manning thinks this guy is awesome. You're not going to just say, wow, what does Peyton Manning know? He knows a lot.
Yeah.
But I think they fell for it, and you've got to be able to kind of take a lot of information when you're making doing a coaching search. Take a lot of information, sift it down, talk to people, yes, but kind of look forward for your own organization and make that call. And it's the wrong call with the coach. He made the wrong call in keeping Mike Maccagnan as a GM. So they're just set back so many years. And then you've got now a quarterback who is in his third year who's going to be looking for a new contract. What do you do if you finish with the first overall draft pick? Do you take Trevor Lawrence and start all over again? Yeah. So it's a mess.
Is Sam Darnold good?
Mike, Sam Darnold is good. I'll tell you what, the Buffalo Bills would be 4-0 and being talked about in Super Bowl terms if Sam Darnold was their quarterback.
Really?
Yeah. Yep. No doubt in my mind. Because he's got talent. He's probably got more athletic talent than Josh Allen. Doesn't have the arm of Josh Allen, but he's got a better touch, probably more accurate in a given situation. The difference is they were smart in Buffalo in building from the ground up.
Right.
They got their quarterback, but they have a good offensive line. They have a really good defense with so many good players. They structure it normally. Brandon Beane is a kind of still an unknown general manager, but he's done a really good job. And it's been normal. It's been build from the bottom up and surround your quarterback with the right pieces. The Bills did that with Josh Allen. The Jets have not done that with Sam Darnold, and Darnold is a mess. And he's gonna pay for it with, I think he'll continue as the Jets quarterback. But, man, you get that first pick, and if Trevor Lawrence is coming out and you feel that he's a generational talent, you got a tough decision to make there because you're talking about a second contract for a quarterback drafted number 3 overall with Darnold versus starting all over. I know it's going to take more time, but you feel you got a better quarterback who's going to be cheaper on a first contract. Those are some major decisions that you have to make, and they're very real.
Now, turn to the other team. Is Daniel Jones good?
I don't know, Mike. I don't know. And I it's bad to think I don't know.
It's just too early, too little sample size, or just too much?
It's not too early. Like when I say I don't know, that's not good to feel that way because in a league where quarterbacks, if they're really good, they get good quickly.
Right.
Right? It's different than, in the old days, you could keep a quarterback. Like Phil Simms was a first-round pick in 1979. Mm-hmm. And you know when his first decent season was? It was 1984. And then he had a good run of, 6-7 years. That doesn't happen that way now. There's not enough patience. But also the game is easier for quarterbacks. It's a passing league, and it's all set up to make it as easy for quarterbacks as possible. So if you're a good quarterback, you can make the change from college to pro much more easily now than at any time in NFL history.
Now, wait.
You're not making that transition like Daniel Jones is. You got to just go, all right. And there's stuff going on around him. The offensive line is bad, and you can't underestimate that.
Now, you think that the game, and I'm glad you said that because, your institutional knowledge, you think the game is easier now for quarterbacks than what it was when they primarily handed off and then, on third down had a play-action pass.
Yep. Yes.
Because of the pass interference rules and stuff like that, or what?
Well, pass interference made it – pass interference – all the rules are against the defense for the most part, right? So most of the rules are set up to make it easier for offenses. So passing games there's never been more passing yards in the league. And I don't think I think it is easier for a quarterback now. Okay. The defenses are less good. They're less, complicated. I mean, look at the defenses of, the Philadelphia Eagles, the Chicago Bears, the Giants, the 49ers, back in the heyday of the 80s. Look at the Cowboys of the 90s. There were some amazing historic defenses. You don't have that now.
Right.
Right, the Ravens in 2000, historic defense. But there isn't anything really close to that. And the reason is because not enough, most of the good offensive players are outplaying the good defensive players. And the rules make it so much easier for quarterbacks. So again, the point being, if you're good coming out of college, you can adjust to this NFL. Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson. Look, he's got other stuff going on, but he's still really good talent. Josh Allen. Now, Sam Darnold is messed up because what's around him is messed up. But if you're good, you can be good quick. And Daniel Jones is not good right now. And he's continuing to turn the ball over. There is something there. There's promise there. I don't know if there's the promise of a number 6 overall pick, but the Giants are willing to be patient with it. And Joe Judge is going to just, grit his teeth and bear it and just try to trudge forward with it.
I find the Daniel Jones thing fascinating because in Washington, which I'm close to, is, Haskins, they came out the same year. There was some, speculation that if Daniel Jones had been there, that they might have taken him, although, Snyder loved Haskins and that's who it was. But some people thought there was a possibility before the draft that could have happened. But neither one of these guys look great. Daniel Jones has 2 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, hasn't had a QB rating over 80. Haskins, 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, a rushing touchdown. He's had 3 over 80. But both of these guys are in situations that neither one of them have really elevated to that level that their franchises had hoped here as they're in year 2.
It's a potential problem. And now with Ron Rivera already saying that there is a limit on what he'll do as far as sticking with Dwayne Haskins, that's unusual for that young a quarterback. So, again, I think the jury is still out on both of these guys. Look, not everybody's good, and not everybody gets good quick. And sometimes it takes time, but there are far fewer examples, Mike, of quarterbacks who kind of have to hang around, stumble, and then find a situation that gets good. Jim Plunkett way back. Jim Harbaugh was a former first-round pick in Chicago, stung for Mike Ditka.
Right.
And then he found his niche, as a grinder in Indianapolis, and he had some bright moments. So it's a different dynamic. And if you're not good immediately in the NFL, I think you take pause much more now than you did in an earlier time.
Like, I don't know if we'll ever see Josh Rosen anywhere.
And it's amazing, isn't it?
I mean, that poor kid. Now, I shouldn't say poor kid because there were people leading up to the draft who really just didn't like his attitude, didn't think he had the makeup. So maybe he's done it to himself. But goodness, I still feel kind of bad for him.
He's the 10th overall pick on his 3rd team.
Yeah.
Practice squad.
Right.
I mean, he can sling it. He's got talent. He's got arm talent. But, you got to have much more than that in the NFL as a quarterback.
Yeah.
And, give the Cardinals credit. If that happened in New York, I don't know if you could pull that off. There's just so much scrutiny.
Right.
Hey, you're giving up on a franchise quarterback after a year, and then you're taking this guy number 1, and like there's no guarantee that he's little, he's fast, but you're gonna have to have this weird offense for him. But they credit them, and Kingsbury has been very forward thinking, and Kingsbury comes out looking really good on this.
Yeah. Lastly, you wrote a book about the NFC East and its glory years, right? And now it's so bad. What has happened to this division? Well,
yeah, that was let's see, I guess you were in 7th grade or something when Joe Gibbs was really good in
I might have been a little bit younger.
You're learning. When you're learning to write script, I'm covering these epic games between Parcells, Gibbs, and it was really about the NFC. It's the Gibbs, Bill Walsh, and Bill Parcells, and their rivalries in the '80s that made it so special. And I like that. Even you're an old soul, Mike. You go back to those, and I'm sure you've seen those highlights, and you see really good football. But just times have changed. Times always change, and things obviously don't stay the same, and you're never going to replicate that kind of rivalry in that division. You've had some moments, and Coughlin brought honor back to the Giants,
right?
But now they're just flailing around, trying to figure it out.
Yeah. And I mean,
same with Washington, same with all the teams. And, Philly now, at least they had a Super Bowl championship in between.
yeah.
Dallas is, forever the talented, underachieving team. And that seems to be the same again.
What do you think it'll take for this division to get back to where it was an esteemed, really highly regarded division?
I think it's coaching and smart quarterback decision-making in terms of building your programs. Because coaching, I don't think you can underestimate it, Mike. And you just, it's an irreducible truth of the NFL. When you have good coaching, when you have good quarterbacks, you're gonna win championships by and large. And the coaches back then, you looked at when Gibbs was coaching, Gibbs, Parcells, Buddy Ryan. It was just these epic showdowns. And then, the Cowboys dominated the 90s, and Jimmy Johnson was the reason they did that. But the day that Jerry Jones got rid of Jimmy Johnson is the day that dynasty died. And he's never been able to find a guy. Barry Switzer inherited, Jimmy's team and won a Super Bowl. But that's what it's going to take. It's going to take great coaching and good to great quarterback play.
Yeah. And we don't know what's going to happen with Dak. We don't know if Carson Wentz, he's looking a little shaky right now. But I also kind of think slow start, no preseason, a lot of injuries and everything. I feel like of those four teams, they've got the best chance to shape themselves up and win this division.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, Dak is good, and I think he'll be their long-term guy. And Wentz, and, you look back and Doug Peterson playing for that tie, that might end up winning the NFC East of a terrible, and they might win it at 7-8-1.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Crazy. But, well, Bob, I have kept you longer than I said I would, but I really appreciate it. We just kept on rolling. You're such an encyclopedia of great knowledge.
You're a good man, Mike. I'm proud to be your friend, and you do really good work. And
friend?
so
We're friends?
Yeah, I guess we're friends. You also buckled when I assaulted you to be on the PFWA board. You finally relented, and I'm grateful for that. And the writers are better off for it.
Yeah. I mean, goodness, I'm just, kind of just doing my job as, filling that role that you need.
No.
But anyway, tell everybody where they can find you, Bob.
What's that, Mike?
Tell them where they can find you.
Oh, at Bob Glauber on Twitter, BOBGLAUBER, and Newsday.com. And local podcast near you, because they're all good.
Good deal. Thank you so much, Bob. I hope you have a good one, and eventually, hopefully, I'll see you soon.
You got it, Mike. Thanks for having me.
All right, hope you guys have a great day. Hope you enjoyed that. Learn a lot from Bob every time we hang out at various NFL events. Really great guy. We love picking on each other, tormenting each other. But again, like I said, he is just an institution of knowledge. Hope you guys have a great day. I'm going to come back later this week with another podcast with Nate Davis revisiting the power rankings after the first quarter of the season. If you remember, at the preview of the season, we did our power rankings and we said we were going to revisit this thing after 4 weeks to see how things were shaking out. And so we're going to get into that at the end of the week. Again, you can read me at usatoday.com. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at @ByMikeJones. And I will talk to you guys again